So now let me talk about relatively inefficient ways to regulate pollution. And these broadly come under the title of what economists call command and control, or direct controls. And when pollution was first regulated, starting basically in the mid and late 1960s, this was sort of the way that people went about it. And they sort of went, okay, we know pollution's a problem, so every firm needs to reduce the amount of pollution it emits by 20% or 50% or something like that. So let's go ahead and look at that kind of situation. Or we might say, every firm is allowed to emit no more than a certain amount. Let's suppose we have two different firms. And firm A is either going to be producing a low-value product per unit of pollution, so it's not creating that much value per unit of pollution. Or firm A finds it relatively low cost to reduce pollution. So whatever it is that firm A is producing, it can produce it in a less pollution-y kind of way with relatively little effort. And then this is going to be in contrast to firm B, which produces a product with high value per unit of pollution, or it finds it relatively hard and costly to reduce pollution. So the two firms are going to be different. And in particular, notice that we generally think that firms are going to go ahead and we can think about the benefits to them of pollution. So we're back to sort of a couple lectures ago. So we're talking about benefits of pollution. And the benefit of pollution is either A, that you're producing a product that allows you to make some profits and gain some trade, or the benefits of pollution are that you're able to avoid reducing pollution. You don't have to alter the way you do things. And it's pretty likely that at this very high level of pollution here, and we'll go ahead and say that they're both starting by producing 100 quantity of pollution, either the last unit you produced was relatively low profit, or it's relatively easy to cut your pollution by just a little bit. So reducing pollution at first is fairly low cost. But as we move to later and later units, it becomes harder and harder, either because these first units of, so we can think about it going forward, these first units of production either were relatively high profit, because you produced the most highly profitable units first, or reducing your pollution all the way down to zero is really, really hard and costly. So this is the marginal benefit for pollution for firm A. And then firm B makes more profit per unit of pollution than firm A, or finds it relatively hard and costly to reduce pollution. So firm B gets a larger marginal benefit from polluting, either because it directly makes more profit or it's avoiding a larger cost by doing that. If we go ahead and have each one of these firms cut their pollution by 50%, so we just sort of legislate that thou shalt not pollute as much as thou were, and you're going to go ahead and reduce your pollution, we're going to have these two firms have a different cost of, or marginal benefit of pollution. And if firm B reduces its pollution, its cost of production, its cost of reducing pollution is, firm A. If for firm A, if it reduces its pollution a little bit more than 50%, its cost of doing so is relatively low. If firm B increases its pollution a little bit, instead of reducing by the full 50%, it gets a benefit out here. And so there's going to be a gains from trade here. If these two firms are able to trade who does the pollution, well, it's easier and cheaper for firm A to reduce pollution than firm B to reduce the pollution. So firm B would have an incentive to say, okay, government regulator, will you let us reduce pollution more, and then we'll sell our pollution allowance to firm B. So in that case, we're going to go ahead and realize a gains from trade. The economy gets this much benefit and pays this much cost, so the gains from trade of rearranging the pollution is that distance there. So we're going to have, in a situation where we have direct demand or direct controls, aka command and control, then we're going to create a situation where the marginal benefit of pollution, or the marginal cost of abating pollution, is different for different users. And that's going to kind of violate the law of one price. Another way of looking about this would be something like, if we said, okay, we're in Southern California, we're having a drought, everyone needs to cut their water use by 20%. Well, some people are already relatively modest users of water. They don't have big giant lawns, they don't have big pools, and if they reduce their water usage by 20%, they're going to start cutting into, bathing and so on and so forth. So it's going to be a big deal. On the other hand, other people who are relatively unfrugal users of water, they're going to go ahead and be cutting out uses of water that were a little bit less important. So anytime we're going to sort of do an across the board, everybody change something by a certain amount, we're going to not reduce the level of the activity as efficiently as we might. Effectively, what we're talking about here is, what is the cost of reducing pollution? And the old sort of 1960s, 1970s style of reducing pollution created a relatively high cost, a relatively high economic cost per unit of pollution reduced, which makes tackling pollution problems look less attractive. On the other hand, if we have something like tradable permits or a pigovian tax, that lowers the cost of reducing pollution. Environmental protection costs less in terms of economic growth and so on and so forth. And so, one, that's just a good thing. Two, presumably that means we can engage in a higher level of environmental protection because it's not as disruptive to the economy.